So let's be real, normally these types of videos are just clickbait BS, right? Like the one exercise that's going to tremendicize your results. It's going to revolutionize your gains. You need to be doing this exercise, otherwise you're a dumb piece of Anyway, I think the exercise that you need to be doing, and this might be even more than a hot take, this might be a controversial opinion, I think the one exercise you need to be doing is the exercise that got you injured. So if you sustained an injury, that is probably what you need to be doing. I know, sounds crazy, right? Let me explain. So one type of comment that I've gotten quite a bit on YouTube, on Instagram, are, that makes my knee hurt just looking at it when I do a deep squat. That makes my elbows hurt just looking at it when I do a deep overhead extension in that really, really deep flexed position. That makes my lower back hurt just looking at it when I do a Jefferson curl. Or if I do a behind the neck press, that makes my shoulders hurt just looking at it. And I've even gotten this comment with regards to neck work. So even me just doing some kind of neck flexion exercise or neck extension, someone will say, oh, I have neck pain. That makes my neck hurt just looking at it. That's probably a sign that's exactly what you should be doing. And I find it incredibly ironic that the exercises that make me feel the very best in terms of joint health get these comments the most. So again, when I'm in a deep stretch position with regard to the elbows or the knees or the hips or the back or the ankles, any of these joints, I think these types of bulletproofing movements, when progressed intelligently, are probably exactly what you need. And so people will avoid those ranges of motion, which puts them more at risk for injury in those parts of the range of motion. You see often people who tear their pecs on bench, they've been half repping their entire existence, and then when the weight gets heavy and forces them into that stretch position that they've never trained in, their pec tears. And they think, oh, well, that part of the range of motion is dangerous. Well, it's dangerous for you because you've never actually trained it before until you used way too heavy of a load all at once. So you see a guy doing quarter squats, or maybe at best, generously half squats, and then it gets too heavy, they get forced down a little bit further, they lose tightness, they fuck up their knee, and they're like, oh my god, deep squats are injurious. Well, yeah, for you. And all too often, I see people suffer a minor injury from a movement, blame the movement, and never do that movement again. So when I had my QL injury, I re-injured it on a whole bunch of movements. I re-injured it on sumo deadlifts, Romanian deadlifts, stiff-legged deadlifts, bent over rows, back squats, box squats, leg presses, unilateral leg presses, and Smith machine deadlifts. I know, don't judge me. It was a dark period in my life. I was getting desperate. Yes, I did deadlifts on the Smith machine. I'm not proud of it. It is what it is. Again, please don't judge me overly harshly. A little bit is okay, but be kind, please. Now, am I never going to do any of those movements again because they injured me once when I was actually already injured? No. At a certain point, you got to gird your loins and get back on that horse. So did you hurt your back on a rounded back deadlift because of the rounded back, or because you were not sufficiently prepared in that position? So it's not just your technique. Technique is a factor, which we'll get to in a little bit, but it's also the loading, it's also the progression, it's also your volume, it's also your recovery leading up to that. And often these injuries that came out of nowhere, they didn't come out of nowhere. There were warning signs leading up to that. And for my QL injury, there were warning signs that I just chose to ignore because I wanted to progress faster. I wanted to do more volume. I wanted to put in the work, etc., without actually listening to my body. So your body can adapt to a lot and can recover from a lot, but you have to put it in a position to actually do so. And more often than not, the people who say, the behind the neck press hurt my shoulders just looking at it, they've never actually done that movement. Or maybe they did it once, but they heard the movement was bad, and so they were expecting pain.
It would be extremely painful.
You're a big guy.
For you.
If you expect pain, there's probably going to be pain. But if you give it an honest shot, if you progress reasonably and gradually, you could actually use that movement to prevent future pain and to bulletproof yourself. By the way, this video is sponsored by Boostcamp. They are going to be the long-term sponsors of the channel. They are a fitness app where you can log your own progress as well as try out various programs from some of the greatest minds in the fitness industry. I have 2 programs up there, Ravage and Rampage. You can check them out. They will treat you right, assuming your gains are winning the hypertrophy. So I will leave a link in the description if you want to try it out. It is free. And often you see people start to identify as the guy who can't do something. And I've been in this position. I've been the guy who can't do deep squats because his hip hurt. Well, in reality, deep squats helped my hip a lot. When I progressed gradually, when I used a more controlled technique, when I wasn't squatting like an asshole, deep squats have actually been very, very valuable. Same thing with Jefferson curls. If I was the guy who couldn't do that, well, I'm kind of limiting myself and even opening myself up to future injury. And I do think that some positions or movements can be inherently a little bit more risky or potentially injurious, but that risk can and should be managed. So, for example, something like the Jefferson curl. People will say it's injurious or it's risky or it's dangerous, right? A lot of fearmongers online will use that to get clicks and to provide alternatives, and just that's how they make their living, by scaring the shit out of people and vilifying movement. Well, what about with just body weight? Just the weight of your torso, your arms, your shoulders, your big old noggin. Is that dangerous? You're just bending down to tie your shoes? They'll be like, well, no, that's a different movement. No, it's a Jefferson curl. It's the same thing, just done without any external resistance. I'll say, okay, well, what about the pink dumbbells? They'll say, oh, well, no, I guess that's fine. Okay, what about one of those small bars that's not 20 kilos, 45 pounds, it's just a small bar, maybe half that weight. And they'll be like, well, no, that's fine. Okay, well, what about a full bar, 20 kilos, 45 pounds? And they'll be like, well, no, I guess that's fine as well. What about if you put 5 kilos or 10 pounds or so on each side? Is that dangerous? And they'll be like, well, I mean, it might be. But why? Why would it be dangerous? And they'll be like, well, I guess if you're not ready for it. And that's where it is. That's what it is. It's what you are ready for. It's what you are accommodated to. It's what you can do based on your training history. For some people, they can't even do a bodyweight Jefferson curl without potentially getting injured. So it just depends on where you are, and you can progress in load and actually bulletproof your body and increase your load tolerance. Load tolerance. God damn it. And so at what point is a movement dangerous? Well, it's going to vary, and you can increase that over time. And of course, a new position might feel awkward or uncomfortable or even painful at first. You might need to slow down your tempo a little bit. You might need to add a pause at certain points. You might even get a little bit overstimulated and need to pull the movement out at certain times and then put it back in later. And I think it's sad how certain content creators have thrown a whole bunch of movements in the iron graveyard, when in reality they were not just perfectly good movements. In some cases they were great movements that I used to think were bad. And these people don't really have any evidence for their claims, and often their biomechanics knowledge or logic or reasoning just doesn't hold up. There's just no evidence for a lot of their claims. They say, well, of course this internal rotation or lower back rounding is injurious, when the evidence is like on dead pig spines or something. Are you a dead pig? I'm going to assume no, so maybe you shouldn't use that as evidence. Now, it's worth noting that there are some exceptions. There are variations in terms of anatomy, in terms of your actual shoulder joints, in terms of your actual hip joints. Everyone is built a little bit differently. So I'm not saying that anyone can adapt to anything and that injuries will never, ever happen. They can happen and they probably will happen. But trying to avoid all end range of motions or thinking your body is super fragile will probably prove you right. I think you want to pick your battles and know which movements and which rep ranges and what loading is going to be suitable to strengthen certain ranges of motion. So on a 1 rep max deadlift, I actually agree that you don't want to actively be rounding your lower back. You want to stay braced. If your lower back rounds slightly, that's probably okay, but it's not the intention, and you want to be actually focused on fighting that as much as possible in order to be efficient and to lift the most weight as possible, as safely as possible. Whereas rounding your lower back on something like a high rep back extension makes a lot more sense. Loading is going to be a lot lighter. The hips are supported. You're actually getting more of a decompression, opening up effect for that area. It's better for blood flow, etc. So different movements, different loading, different rep range, etc. is going to be very, very important here. So next time you see someone doing an exotic movement and you think, that makes my knee hurt just looking at it, that's probably exactly what you should be doing. Just make sure that you scale things up reasonably. All right, if you like this video, definitely check out my books. They will help you a lot in your fitness journey. They have all the information you need to write your own training plans. Thank you so much for the support. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.